So welcome to Chapter 2, the role of IMC in the marketing process. This is actually one of my favorite lectures, one of the most important topics, I think, when you think about marketing and integrated marketing communications. The reason it's so important is we're going to spend a lot of time talking about identifying the ideal consumer target market, and then how do we go about positioning our brand to be most appealing to that specific target market, and then identify the marketing mix decisions that are certainly going to influence your advertising and promotion strategies. So without further ado, let's get going. Here are the key things I really want you guys to learn from this chapter. First of all, we're going to talk about the role of advertising and promotion in an organization's integrated marketing program. Certainly advertising is the most visible, and promotion can certainly be critical in terms of driving results. So an integral part of an integrated marketing program. As I mentioned before, we're going to spend a fair amount of time on defining target marketing. So identifying who is the ideal consumer target for your brand, product, or service. And that'll come out as a result of doing some market segmentation. So segmenting the market into various segments and then analyzing those segments and determining which specific segment is going to be most motivated by your brand's product or promise, and then really getting to know that ideal consumer target. Then describe positioning and repositioning strategies. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I'm going to share a couple of examples from my time at the Coca-Cola Company. Again, positioning, kind of live by the old saying, either position or run the risk of being positioned. And hopefully by the end of this lecture, you'll understand the importance of that. And then lastly, identify the marketing mix decisions that influence the advertising and promotion strategy of a specific company. So this slide really kind of lays out in detail the marketing and promotions process that most companies follow. And it kind of starts with, as you might imagine, analyzing the marketplace, right? So marketing strategy and analysis. So here we really focus on three things, right? The opportunity that is kind of created as a result of what's going on in the marketplace. Obviously, we need to understand the competitors, so we need to analyze the competitive activity. And then certainly, and really this should be first, is understanding the target market, right? So understanding the consumer. So kind of step one is kind of analysis, right? Then based on that, we kind of get into the target marketing process, right? So we understand our opportunity. Now we're starting to identify markets that make up that opportunity. Then we do some market segmentation, right? So segmenting like consumers, and then kind of determining after we've done that segmentation and analyzing those segments, we kind of select the target market that is going to be, again, most motivated by what our brand's promise is. And then after we've done that, we can then get to the process of positioning through our marketing strategy. So that's kind of all the steps that kind of make up target market process. Then once we've done that, now we can start moving into marketing planning and program development. And so this is where we start making product decisions, pricing decisions, and channel of distribution decisions. So you remember from the Principles of Marketing class, the 4 Ps. So kind of product, price, place, promotion. So that's where that kind of all shows up here. Then that leads to promotional decisions. So now we start talking about kind of all the elements that make up the IMC or the marketing mix. So advertising, direct marketing, sales promotion, personal selling, etc. And that leads to kind of engaging the ultimate consumer And then from a business to business perspective, it may be engaging other businesses, right? And so that hopefully leads to purchase, and hopefully that leads to repurchase down the road. So there you have it, kind of a process on a page of the marketing and promotions process. So again, the first big bucket is kind of this idea of marketing strategy and analysis. And what this enables us to do is really guide the allocation of an organization's resources, right? Resources are not unlimited, right? So you have to make choices. And that's really at the end of the day what strategy is about making thoughtful choices. And in order to make thoughtful choices, a fair amount of analysis has to be done. So certainly strategic marketing helps guide the allocation of an organization's resources. It certainly guides specific marketing programs and policies. And this evolves from an organization's overall corporate strategy, right? So you may have the corporate strategy at large, and then you may have specific marketing strategies for specific divisions of a company or specific brands of a company. So case in point, Coca-Cola has an overarching corporate strategy, which is all about beverages for life, which is providing solutions to every consumer's beverage needs, no matter what those are. So that's kind of the corporate strategy for the Coca-Cola company. But then each and every brand, whether it's Coca-Cola or Sprite or Fanta or Fresca, is going to have their own strategies for that specific brand. And then certainly a strategic marketing plan helps, it allows for an understanding of market opportunities, competition, and market segments. And so thinking about market segments, right? So these are distinct consumer groups within a market who have common needs. So when we start talking about segmentation, that's what we're speaking of. So again, we start with this idea of opportunity analysis, really looking at the marketplace to identify opportunities that may exist for a specific company. And so this is where we look at, are there favorable demand trends? Like what's going on with consumer behavior? Are there trends that we need to be focused on that create an opportunity for us? So customer needs and opportunities that are not being satisfied today. Many of you can think about opportunities for new products that will better meet the needs that you have. And in fact, in our Principles of Marketing class, we ask you to come up with a new product or service that will better meet needs that you believe are in the marketplace. So certainly that creates opportunity. And then also thinking about where can a firm compete effectively? So where can we better compete? And this visual here of Costa Coffee. Some of you may know that the Coca-Cola company recently purchased Costa Coffee for, I think it was $50 billion, a lot of money. Or maybe it was 5.2 billion to be exact, which is still a lot of money. So why would the Coca-Cola company spend that kind of money to buy the Costa Coffee Company? Well, they did it because they look at the marketplace and they see that more and more consumers are drinking more coffee-based beverages, and that's just not a space where Coca-Cola has historically had credibility. So they bought the Costa Coffee Company in order to give themselves credibility in the coffee beverage space. Again, because the opportunity is there. So that would explain why Costa Coffee is now pictured there with Coca-Cola. And then the steps to identify market opportunities. Obviously, you have to examine the marketplace and then observe demand trends and competition in various market segments. So opportunity analysis. So once we've kind of done the opportunity analysis and we understand where there may be opportunities for us, we then need to analyze who may already be operating in that opportunity area. So we need to analyze the competition. And we analyze the competition because we're looking for what can we do different, better, or more special that will perhaps give us a competitive advantage. And so competitive advantage, think of those as attributes that give a firm an edge over the competition. So it could be better quality or higher quality products. It could be superior customer service. So think about Chick-fil-A's superior customer service versus, I don't know, another chicken sandwich place like Popeyes. I think it's safe to say, I think you all will agree that Chick-fil-A has a strategic competitive advantage when it comes to superior customer service. Or maybe lower production costs and lower prices. So when we think about lower costs and lower prices, the first brand that comes to mind is Walmart, right? And they have a strategic competitive advantage, which enables them to always be the low price leader in the retailing world, because they have figured out ways to control their cost so that they can always provide the lowest prices. Or it could be a competitive advantage, could be maybe dominating a specific channel of distribution, right? So maybe online retailing. The brand that certainly comes to mind there is Amazon. They certainly dominate online retailing. So they have a strategic competitive advantage in that specific channel because it's the channel that they operate in. Or advertising can be used to garner a competitive advantage. And we think about categories that you see the most advertising in. The two categories that come to my mind: mobile phone service and insurance, right? And just think about all those insurance commercials, all those AT&T and Verizon wireless commercials that you see all the time, right? Those are obviously hugely populated categories in terms of consumers using those categories. Everyone has to have insurance, and these days everyone has to have mobile phone service. So those categories are in high demand, right? And so the reason why the advertisers advertise so much is they want to maintain top of mind awareness so that when consumers are moving into those categories, they think of their brand, right? And you oftentimes see competitive advertising, certainly in the mobile phone space, Verizon always comparing themselves to AT&T and vice versa. So there are different ways to go about achieving a competitive advantage, and that's critically important to understand for your brand. So now that we've done some opportunity analysis and some competitive analysis, now we can start to identify and start thinking about target market selection. So again, that's done after we've evaluated the market opportunities and we've done a competitive analysis. And the importance of target market selection, it certainly has direct implications on a firm's advertising and promotional efforts, right? Because you have to know who are you trying to reach before you can go about trying to reach them. So target market selection, critically important, but again, comes after we've analyzed the market and analyzed our competition. So when we think about the target marketing process, it's a pretty simple process. It starts with certainly understanding or identifying markets with unfulfilled needs, right? So what are those needs that various types of consumers have that you believe your company or your brand or product or service can do a better job of delivering against those needs? So start by understanding what are the unfulfilled needs, or maybe you believe that your brand, product, or service can meet those needs better than the competition. So start by identifying those markets or those groups of consumers that have unfulfilled needs. That kind of leads us to determining market segmentation. And we're about to talk about there are multiple ways we can segment a total population to come up with, the segment that's going to make the most sense. And once we've done that market segmentation, then we can go about selecting a specific target market from those various segments. And then once we've identified a specific target market, then we can go through the process of positioning to make our brand promise the most relevant and appealing and motivating to that specific target market. So when we think about identifying markets, what we're really talking about here is identifying specific needs of different groups or segments of people, right? And we may select one or more of those segments as a potential target. So it doesn't always just have to be one. But we do need to isolate those. And the reason we do segmentation is to isolate consumers and put the ones that have similar lifestyles, needs, and the like together so that we have a really clear picture of who our consumer target is, what their needs are, what their behaviors are, what their attitudes are, what their values are, so that we stand the best chance of being appealing and motivating them. And so certainly, identifying markets gives us the opportunity to increase our knowledge of specific requirements that different consumers have. And you think about the U.S. craft beer market. My gosh, that category has exploded in growth over the years. And you think about microbreweries, brew pubs, contract brewing companies, regional craft breweries. I mean, they're popping up left and right all over the place. And they're responding to different consumers' needs, right? Whether it's taste or social appeal or image or economic status. So, wow, identifying specific segments of the population where craft brewery can better meet those needs has opened the doors for so many craft breweries that many of you probably enjoy today. Now, as I mentioned before, there are multiple ways to go about this process of market segmentation. These are probably the most common ways, right? And probably the most common is demographics, right? And we know demographics are things like age and sex and family size, marital status, etc. So oftentimes, demographics is the first way that marketers go about segmenting a population. But certainly geographic is also a way. So region, city size, metropolitan area are ways that marketers can go about segmenting a population. But what about socioeconomics? So now we're talking about income and levels of education or types of occupation, whether it's blue collar or white collar. Those are gray collar. Those are certainly that's certainly a key way to go about segmenting a population. And then lastly, this idea of psychographics. I love that term, psychographics, right? So this is things like personality and life cycles and lifestyles, right? Now, I'm a firm believer in that segmentation works best when you can use a couple of different routes, right? So maybe demographics and psychographics, right? So demographics helps us to understand precisely who is our target consumer. And we're going to be talking later in this class about using media to reach a specific target consumer. So demographics really helps us understand who that consumer is and how which media we can use to best reach that consumer. So that's certainly important. But psychographics, if we understand their personality and their lifestyles and their values, now all of a sudden we've got so much more information that helps us to create the best messaging that's going to be most appealing to that specific consumer. So I love the idea of combining demographic and psychographic from a segmentation perspective to kind of paint the picture of precisely who is the consumer that we're going to go after and what is the best messaging that we can use to reach them. Now, here's a really good resource for you guys. And those of you who had me in Principles of Marketing, hopefully you will remember the Claritas Prism groups, right? So these are groups of like consumers based on kind of understanding level of urbanicity and level of influence. And so what Claritas has done is to group like consumers together and provide some very detailed descriptions of those like consumers. This is a really good starting point for market segmentation and kind of finding just the right segment of the population that you think is going to be most motivated by what you have to offer. So again, Claritas, Prism Social Groups is a great resource. I'm certainly will provide a document for you guys to review as you're getting into your team project, which really takes advantage of what Claritas brings to the table here. So we talked about using geographic, demographic, psychographics as ways to segment a population, but we can also segment a population based on buying situations. So markets can actually be divided by customer buying situations. So those buying situations, the criteria could be outlet types, right? So are consumers predominantly buying in-store or online? We can segment the population that way. Certainly, Amazon has segmented the population into people who are looking to buy online. Could be benefits sought. So understanding what different product features are and what different consumer needs are, that's certainly a way to segment a population. So you think about, I don't know, the beverage business obviously comes to my mind. Coca-Cola can segment population amongst those who are seeking caffeine versus those who are not seeking caffeine, right? So that's one way to go about segmenting a population. Or it could be based on product usage. Maybe you have an opportunity to build your business by increasing frequency of purchase among people who are light users. So giving them more reasons to purchase your brand more frequently. So you can segment the population of your consumers based on those who are light, medium, or heavy users. So that's certainly a way to go about segmenting a population. Or it could be awareness and intentions, right? For many brands, they may focus on, segmenting those consumers who are not aware of their brand yet. And so they will devise specific marketing strategies to drive awareness amongst those who are unaware. Or conversely, there are many brands whose marketing strategies focus on increasing frequency of purchase among those who are already aware or already buying. And this is where loyalty programs, frequency programs come into play. So certainly one can segment a population of your own consumers based on awareness or maybe their intentions, right? And then also behavior. You can segment the population based on a level of effort, or maybe comparison, or is there certainly special effort required? So other ways based on kind of consumer behavior or buying situations that you can actually segment a population. So just a bit more on this idea of kind of consumer behavior and using that to segment a population. So let's talk about behavioralistic segmentation. So again, this is about dividing consumers into groups according to their usage or their level of loyalty or their particular buying response to a product. And I'm sure you've heard the old 80-20 rule before. Generally speaking, 20% of buyers account for 80% of sales volume. That applies to so many categories, right? So, understanding who your heaviest consumers are, who your top consumers are, and segmenting them and really getting to know them and marketing precisely to them can really pay dividends when you think about the 80-20 rule. There's also this idea of benefit segmentation. So not all consumers are looking for the same benefits within a particular category. So let's think about watches, right? So the Rolex diamonds encrusted Rolex on the right delivers very, very different benefits than the Apple Watch on the left, right? So the consumers, that's not the same consumer, right? The person looking for the diamond encrusted Rolex really doesn't care about all the bells and whistles and functionality that the Apple iWatch delivers. They're really looking for style and to make a personal statement about themselves with the diamond encrusted Rolex versus the Apple Watch. And I'm a proud Apple Watch user. I love all the functionality that comes with that Apple Watch. I'm not really concerned about making a fashion statement. I'm much more concerned about all the functional benefits that come with the Apple Watch. So you can certainly segment populations based on the different benefits that consumers are seeking. So once we've kind of gone through the process of segmenting a population, we then need to make some decisions around how do we want to cover this market? So what are our market coverage alternatives, right? And generally speaking, they fall into these three buckets, this idea of undifferentiated marketing. So this is really about ignoring segment differences and offering just one product or service to the entire market. Coca-Cola comes to mind. When the Coca-Cola company started 136 years ago, it was one product, and actually it was one product for 80 plus years, right? One product to appeal to the masses. That was kind of the idea. Same thing with the first automobile that was created, the Ford, right? One product to appeal to the entire market. So those are examples of undifferentiated marketing. Well, conversely, you may have differentiated marketing. So this is about involves marketing in a number of different segments, and we develop strategies or develop separate marketing strategies for each one of those segments. So the best example there is the Marriott company. So Marriott has 7 or 8 different brands of hotels that appeal to very different consumer targets. One company in Marriott, but they have different brands and different marketing strategies to appeal to different market segments. So that's a really good example of differentiated marketing. And then lastly, this idea of concentrated marketing. And L'Oreal is a good example there. Selecting one specific segment and attempting to capture the largest share possible amongst that segment. And Rolex may be another example there of really going after specific white collar, high income, fashion conscious consumers and doing everything you can to maximize your share amongst that specific, very specific consumer target. So again, undifferentiated marketing, differentiated marketing, and concentrated marketing are all different ways to go about kind of addressing this question of what's our market coverage strategy. So now we've gone through this very involved process of market segmentation, and we'll probably have many alternatives, right? And so now it's all about how do we select the most attractive segment? And certainly here are the things that come to mind that we need to be able to answer in order to help us select the most attractive segment, right? So certainly sales potential of the segment. Which segment, based on what we know about consumers and their buying behavior and their purchase frequency, their willingness to spend, which segment of the population is going to deliver us the highest sales potential? Or maybe opportunities for growth. I mean, certainly becomes important for existing brands. If you're looking to grow your business, you may want to identify different segments that you don't have today that reflect, high opportunities for growth, right? Or maybe competition analysis. Maybe you believe that based on your research and understanding consumers and your product, that you can do much better by going after this group of consumers who maybe have been using your competitors' products. Or maybe ability to compete. I mean, obviously, the last thing you want to do is select a market segment where you don't believe you're going to be able to effectively compete. That would be a tremendous waste of money. But also, what about ability to market to this group? In order to realize benefits from market segmentation, you've got to be able to market to that specific group. So being able to market to the group obviously should come into part of the decision-making process for determining the most attractive segment. Oh, the idea of market positioning, one of my favorite topics in the entire world of marketing. It's so important to get positioning right. I think it's really difficult to get any other marketing strategy or tactic right if you haven't gotten your positioning strategy right. And so what is positioning? So what do we mean by that? So basically it's about fitting a product or service to one or in some cases more segments of a broader market to make it unique within that specific marketplace, right? So it's about positioning your brand, product, or service so that you are perceived as different, better, or more special to that specific groups of consumers. So kind of the positioning statement, you guys may remember this from Principles of Marketing or maybe one of your other classes, certainly brand strategy class, we covered this. The idea of creating a positioning statement, which always starts with the idea of who precisely are we trying to reach. Then we start talking about what is our product or service, where are we choosing to compete, and that leads us to what are the benefits that we will deliver to consumers, and then what are the reasons to believe, so what are the support points, or why should consumers believe that we can be the best option for them in that particular category. So positioning is just about that. Now there's a couple of different ways to approach positioning. You could certainly approach it by focusing on the consumer. All right, so this is about linking the product with the benefits that consumers will derive, right? So Apple's a really good example of using the idea of simplicity. Everything about Apple is simple, right? And they've leveraged the idea of simplicity to help them stand out in the crowded marketplace. So certainly focusing on consumer and the consumer benefits and identifying ways that your brand, product, or service can better meet those consumer needs is certainly a great way to go about positioning. But there may also be the occasion where you can focus on your competition. So in this case, it positions your product or service by comparing the benefit it offers versus the competition, right? So Avis has notoriously been kind of number 2 in the rental car category. And one of the things that they did a long time ago actually was to recognize the fact that they were number 2, but they use that to kind of as a call to action and this idea of, hey, look, we know we're number two, which is why we're going to try harder to earn your business. So while they weren't calling out Hertz directly, they certainly positioned themselves relative to their competition, and they actually leveraged their number two status to their benefit. So again, positioning critically important. And again, generally speaking, two different approaches. You can focus on the consumer and the benefits that they're seeking, or in some cases, it may make sense to focus on the competition. So kind of building on this idea of positioning strategies. So, perhaps one approach could be positioning by product attributes and benefits. And so here what we're trying to do is set the brand apart from competitors on the basis of maybe specific characteristics or benefits that consumers are seeking. 5-Hour Energy is a really good example of that, right? 5-Hour Energy understands that consumers just need energy, and they want energy for 5 hours worth of energy, right? But they don't want to spend money to buy and maybe consume other beverages. They're just looking for energy. So 5-Hour Energy is really singularly focused on this idea of, look, hey, drink this little bottle of fluid and you're going to have 5 hours worth of energy. So very specific product attribute and benefit. Salient attributes are certainly those that are important to consumers and could be the basis for making a purchase decision. So I don't know, if you're thinking about a spring break vacation, a salient attribute could be it's got to be warm and sunny, right? Because that's what your needs are, right? So, warm and sunny would be a good example of a salient attribute as it relates to a spring break vacation. There's also the opportunity in some cases to position by price or quality. And so this is generally done where cost comes secondary to quality, right? So, Kohl's is a really good example of a company has been very successful in positioning by price and quality, right? So, they're not the low price leader, right? That would be Walmart, but they are generally lower priced than other retailers like Macy's. And the level of quality is at the right level for their pricing strategy, right? So positioning by price or quality can certainly be an effective way to go about positioning in the marketplace. So just rounding out the other ways to go about positioning strategies, right? So you can certainly position your brand, product, or service by use or application of your product. There's no better example of that than Arm & Hammer baking soda, which has hundreds of different uses, and many of which consumers didn't even know about, right? So this positioning strategy can be used to enter a market on the basis of a particular use or application of a product. And Arm & Hammer's done a great job of building their sales by helping consumers realize all the other potential uses of its baking soda product. It goes well beyond baking. How many of you actually use or have ever used baking soda as toothpaste, for example, or used baking soda in your refrigerator to eliminate odors? So lots of different uses for Arm & Hammer baking soda. Also positioning by product class. So maybe an example here could be, let's see, frozen orange juice versus freshly squeezed orange juice. So frozen from concentrate or freshly squeezed. Two totally different classes for the same product category, if you will. Or you can certainly position by product user All right, so low, medium, heavy users, as we talked about previously. You can certainly position by your competitor. We talked about Avis versus Hertz there. Um, or maybe positioned by cultural symbols. So what might be a good example of this? So maybe think about the Keebler elves, or Tony the Tiger, right? Or the Jolly Green Giant, right? Or other categories, maybe Colin Kaepernick with Nike. So positioning by cultural symbols is certainly a positioning strategy. And all of this is at the end of the day about making the brand easily identifiable and differentiated from other brands. So positioning, so critically important. And again, I would love for you to remember the idea of either position your brand or run the risk of being positioned by your competition, which more than likely you're not going to like. So it becomes really important to take the responsibility of positioning your brand to most effectively compete in the marketplace. So we've talked about the importance of positioning, right? But oftentimes, as the marketplace around us evolves or changes, we may find ourselves in the position where we actually have to reposition a brand that's been around for a long time. And this may come about because of declining or stagnant sales in a category, or maybe anticipating opportunities in other market positions. Now, repositioning is kind of difficult to accomplish because of entrenched perceptions and attitudes towards a product or service or brand that consumers may have. And so I'm going to take you through the next few slides, an actual case study from the Coca-Cola Company, which is all about repositioning the Diet Coke brand, which has been around since the 1980s, right? But the Diet Cola segment was in decline, right? Consumers were shying away from drinking more diet soda because of concerns of artificial sweeteners, because of so many other alternative beverages that were showing up on the scene, whether it's bottled water or bottled tea or ready to drink coffee beverages or energy drinks. There were so many other alternatives to consumers. So what the Coca-Cola company saw was the Diet Cola segment was in decline, year over year decline. And but importantly, Diet Coke is a huge brand for the company, a billions-dollar brand for the Coca-Cola Company. So it's not a brand which they were just willing to throw in the white towel and say, okay, well this market is declining, so we're just going to move away from Diet Coke and put our resources, towards something else. It's just too big of a brand to do that. So the company had to make some really difficult choices on how to go about repositioning the Diet Coke brand to make it more relevant to a perhaps new segment of consumers. So, what Coca-Cola understood by doing a fair amount of research and following consumer trends and just getting to know consumers a little bit better, they understood that even though this Diet Cola category has been in decline, they understood that there's still a significant opportunity in the diet sparkling soft drink category. And in fact, their research validated that 70% of millennial consumers are actually open to drinking diet sparkling soft drinks. So that was an important aha, if you will, when Coca-Cola started thinking about repositioning. Is like they kind of went through a process of market segmentation to identify, well, who are those segments of the population that are actually open to drinking diet sparkling soft drinks. and they identified millennials as a key opportunity. So once they identified millennials, then they really needed to get to know uh, that consumer target inside and out. And so a few things that they learned about millennials. Um, they're certainly driven by brand image and taste and when selecting a beverage. So those things are important to consumers, but they also are seeking variety and they like to live life on the go, right? And then they also understood that millennials are more likely to make impulse purchases. In fact, 1 in 4 are looking for a beverage to drink right away, right? So at the end of the day, Coca-Cola learned that millennials are kind of searching for bolder, spice of life experiences that stimulate their senses, right? So just really understanding what makes that millennial consumer target click, if you will. So once Coca-Cola, completed their research and they really got to know that millennial consumer target, now they can go about the process of crafting a positioning statement that is going to make the new Diet Coke, if you will, more appealing to that specific consumer target. So this is a diagram that I actually love that I borrowed from the Coca-Cola company. It's kind of the way they go about thinking about their marketing strategies. It kind of all starts at the bottom with business ambition. So what's the ambition for the business at large? And in Coca-Cola's case, certainly is to make more money, right? Make more profit. But then that kind of ladders up to what's the brand's ambition. So you've got the company's ambition, but what's the specific ambition for a specific brand? And in the case of Diet Coke, it was all about how do we turn this brand around? How do we make the brand more relevant and appealing to a new set of consumers? Well, then we think about what's the marketplace, what are the specific attributes of the brand, and what do we really know about the people, right? So we look at the marketplace, we look at the category insights, we examine what's going on with competition. So we learn as much as we can about the marketplace. And then we think about our specific brand. Well, what are the consumer benefits? And what are the brand and product equities, or maybe the unique equities that we have and that we bring to the table? And then certainly understanding people, right? Who is the consumer target? What are the human and cultural insights about that specific target that we need to understand in order to win? And that all ladders up to the brand vision, which kind of leaves us with a brand archetype and personality, and that leads to the whole brand identity system. So there you have in one diagram kind of the process that the Coca-Cola company follows in building its brands. And so kind of following this process and following along with the numbers here, this is a good example of a positioning statement that I spoke about a few moments ago. So for number one, multidimensional, self-aware or self-assured and aware millennials. So that's the very specific consumer target that we're going after. Diet Coke is so here, number two, what's the competitive environment that we're trying to compete in? So Diet Coke is the well-being refreshment beverage. Now, they didn't say Diet Cola, or they didn't say beverage in general. They got pretty specific that they're trying to compete in the well-being refreshment beverage space. So again, giving themselves kind of some opportunity for growth. So not pigeonholing themselves specifically on kind of the diet cola segment, but again, giving themselves some space. And so thinking about well-being refreshment beverage. So that's where they're choosing to compete. So based on that consumer target and where they're trying to compete, Diet Coke is the preferred choice for pleasurable uplift, right? So this is the consumer benefit. because only Diet Coke champions a light-hearted, optimistic, and unapologetic spirit through calorie-free uplift and delicious taste. So there you have it. And that's the positioning statement for the repositioning strategy of Diet Coke. Again, this was all about how do we go about making Diet Coke relevant and appealing to a new set of consumers. So understanding that consumer, what makes them tick, and what are they looking for, and how can we position the Diet Coke brand to make it more relevant to that specific consumer target. So after understanding that and developing that positioning strategy, then Diet Coke went about the process of actually creating 4 new bold flavors. And you guys may remember seeing these cans in your local convenience store. So new bold flavors, whether it's let's see, feisty cherry or zesty blood orange, ginger lime, so new and different kind of exotic flavors of Diet Coke that Coca-Cola knew that millennial consumer was looking for. But they also created new packaging. So packaging that looks a little more contemporary, is more relevant for the millennial consumer. It's not the old squatty Diet Coke can that's been around forever. So new flavors, updated brand image to drive trial and consideration. And this was all about against the brand strategy of capturing incremental purchases with expanded options for millennials and those low or no calorie drinkers. And so this all led to an entirely new marketing campaign for Diet Coke. And, it was successful. They were successful in turning around the trend in the category. They were able to generate growth for the Diet Coke brand for the first time in several years. So just by examining what's going on in the marketplace, understanding consumers, identifying, which specific segment of the population do we think opportunity exists, then getting to know that segment inside and out, and then developing a positioning strategy against that very specific consumer target, and creating the right marketing activities, marketing mix to be effective against that consumer target. So there you have it, the Diet Coke repositioning strategy is kind of a real world case where, positioning matters. So another important part of this chapter is all about understanding, how your different marketing mix decisions can certainly impact your promotion strategy, right? So starting with product decisions, right? So thinking about product symbolism. So that refers to kind of what a product or brand means to consumers, or maybe what consumers experience in purchasing and using a product. Hopefully some of you have received that Tiffany's blue box at some point in your life, or maybe you will at some point future in your life. But that little blue box is a very strong symbol for the Tiffany's brand, which when consumers see that blue box, they know something really special is inside that blue box. So it's a tremendously strong symbol that represents highest quality jewelry product. So certainly branding, important. So building and maintaining a favorable identity of the company and its products. We talk about brand strategy and branding in my brand strategy class, and it's so important to get it right and to be consistent. And then certainly packaging. So think about maybe packaging is the best way to truly differentiate your brand in a crowded marketplace. So you oftentimes see for expensive perfumes, you'll see very unique, very stylish packaging that really helps to differentiate, one perfume versus another. So just different product decisions can certainly have a huge impact on a company's marketing strategy. Oh, the topic of branding, again, near and dear to my heart. I like the saying, products are built in factories. Brands are built in the minds of consumers, right? So think about that. Brands are really what consumers perceive about your product or service. It's not necessarily what you say it is, it's about how consumers perceive it. That's how brands are built. So again, products are built in the factories and you have complete control over that. Brands are built in the minds of consumers and you always don't have direct control of that. Now, certainly, your marketing strategies can and should have a significant impact on how consumers perceive your product, but that's not always the case. So branding is all about building and maintaining certainly brand awareness and interest. It helps develop and enhance attitudes towards a company or a product. Certainly branding builds relationships between the consumer and the brand. And then a couple of key things, so brand identity. So think about the combination of things. So it's the combination of the name and the logo and the symbols and the design and the packaging, all of those working together to create brand identity. And then a really important concept of brand equity. So brand equity can best be defined as think about the value that a specific brand has that is above and beyond the intrinsic value of what the product delivers, right? So it could be, take Coca-Cola and take, I don't know, Big K Cola. So Coca-Cola, a brand that's been around for 136 years, is worth $70 billion. And compare that to Big K Cola, which is a private label cola that Walmart sells. Different brand equities, right? And so Coca-Cola's got a tremendous amount of equity that has been built up over the years because of all the marketing activities they've created. And it just adds more perceived value for that brand, which means that they can charge more for Coca-Cola. And again, it's just more perceived value. And that truly is what brand equity is that perceived value above and beyond just the intrinsic value that a product delivers. So we've talked about kind of branding, but other marketing mix decisions, critically important decisions. Well, certainly, perhaps nothing is more important than price, right? So pricing decisions. So the price variable obviously refers to what the consumer has to give in exchange for a purchase. And lots of things go into factoring or determining the absolute best price for your particular brand. You certainly need to understand your cost and what kind of margins are you looking for. So you start by understanding your cost, what margins you're looking for, and then you can determine what your selling price is so that you can deliver those specific profit margins. Maybe demand factors. How much demand? Are you in a high demand or low demand category? So remembering the kind of the idea of supply and demand. When demand outpaces supply, then you can get away with charging a higher price. But when supply outpaces demand, then oftentimes prices need to be reduced in order to compete in the marketplace. Certainly understand the competition. What's the competition charging for similar products, and how do you price your product so that you can be most competitive? And again, that could become a positioning strategy. Our perceived quality, right? So understanding what is the perceived quality of your product versus that of another. And if it's a higher perceived quality, then you can certainly get away with charging a higher price. Or it could be the actual product quality is different. And so if you've got a superior product from a quality perspective, you should be charging a premium price for that product versus your competition. And certainly the level of advertising. If it's, again, it's a high demand category, very competitive category, maybe you're priced at parity with your competition. Well, now you're really going to have to rely on a significant amount of advertising to break through the clutter and to gain consumers' interest and attention. So the level of advertising that you have to apply to a particular brand or product could, in fact, help you determine what your pricing strategy should be. So we've talked about branding, we've talked about price, so now let's talk about place. So remember one of the 4 P's, place. So this is really all about marketing channels. So generally speaking, there's 2 routes to market, if you will. There's kind of the direct route, so direct channel route, where we go directly to consumers. Best example there is, of course, Amazon or maybe like a Mary Kay Cosmetics. So going directly to a specific segment of consumers, driven oftentimes by direct response advertising, telemarketing, or even certainly in the case of Amazon, the internet. Direct channels become really effective when selling expensive or complex products, right? So you've identified a very specific consumer, you've got a complex sell, you need to go direct to that consumer to make sure that you're giving them all the information they need to make a decision. So those are examples of direct channels. And certainly indirect channels are those networks of wholesalers and retailers, right? So Coca-Cola is a wholesaler to target the retailer, right? So that would be an example of indirect channel. In fact, Coca-Cola almost exclusively follows the indirect channel route, right? They work through retailers who sell end products to consumers. So it's important to understand, obviously, what's your route to market, because that will have a significant impact on your marketing strategies and certainly your advertising and promotion strategies. And finally, in this chapter, we're going to talk about another really important concept that I think you will use again if you move into a career of marketing. It's this idea of push versus pull strategy. So what do we mean by that? So promotional push strategies is essentially where we're pushing the product through the channels of distribution by selling it and promoting it to those channels of distribution. So Coca-Cola, for example, uses a push strategy. In fact, I was responsible for leading a sales organization that was responsible for selling Coca-Cola products into various distribution channels, whether it's convenience stores or drugstores or theme parks or movie theaters. So selling Coca-Cola products into those channels of distribution is a really good example of a push strategy. And trade advertising is often used to motivate wholesalers and retailers to purchase products for resale. So this idea of pushing your product through distribution channels so that you can get it in front of ultimate consumers, that's what we mean by the idea of push strategies. Now, pull strategies is different, right? So pull strategies is all about spending money on advertising and sales promotion directed toward the ultimate end consumer. So this is where you're encouraging consumers to actually request the product. from a retailer. So you're really working to create consumer demand, which will in turn prompt your retailers to actually stock your product. So this idea of pushing the product through distribution channels to get availability and to ultimately get it in front of consumers, or maybe starting with the idea of just creating consumer demand, which will in turn enable you to get more distribution and availability. Now, those two strategies are often used in combination. And again, Coca-Cola is a really good example of that, where we used push strategies to gain availability of our products in multiple retail channels. And then obviously Coca-Cola uses a tremendous amount of pull strategies. So they spend billions of dollars on advertising and marketing programming to drive awareness and interest of their products in actually creating consumer demand. So oftentimes you see companies using both push strategies and pull strategies in concert with one another. But it's important to understand the difference between the two. So there you have it, push versus pull. So that kind of concludes chapter 2. Again, a really important chapter in the world of marketing at large and understanding kind of how to go about segment and population, positioning strategies, and then how those strategies are going to have an impact on your marketing mix decisions. All that critically important to do before we start thinking about developing advertising. So hope you enjoyed chapter 2. We'll talk soon.